Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Eric Mackey,
And I'm Christine Downs.
and we're trainers for Northeast PBIS. We're going to be talking today about data routines and evaluation plans. The content for this training was developed by Northeast PBIS and the Center on Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. You're probably very familiar with this graphic. These are our critical features of PBIS. Several of us like to call this the footstool, with systems, data, and practices working together to uphold and promote desired outcomes. Paying attention to these three critical features helps us to make sure that we get the outcomes that we want to see. So remember, practices are what the adults do, like provide the lesson plans and give out the acknowledgments and use discipline strategies as designed. The systems are what we put in place to make sure that the practices still happen, like creating guides and schedules and trainings. We're going to be more focused on the data piece today. Data is what we gather to assess our needs, set goals, measure progress, and determine whether we're actually doing the things that we said we were going to do. So we're going to talk about fidelity and outcome data. Fidelity data tells us about the systems and the practices that we as the adults provide to students. And in other words, are we doing the things that we said we were going to do, and are we doing them the right way? And outcomes are the data that tells us the impact of what we do on students and on teachers. So when we're thinking about an evaluation plan, here's a nice example. You see this with us in the Academy. And it just gives you a brief overview of what you may want to do when thinking about fidelity and outcomes and evaluating those, such as having the purpose, is it for capacity building, fidelity, progress monitoring, etc. What is the tool itself, such as the tiered fidelity inventory or the team implementation checklist? What is the function of that particular tool? So a brief description of what it is, what it measures, and who it's for. And then a general schedule as to when you would ideally want to complete that particular measure, such as fall, winter, or spring, and how often. Christine, would you have any tips for using this plan?
I would just say try to be as specific as possible. If you can put in months or even dates when you want to do the tools, that's helpful. And they shouldn't worry about trying to do them all every year. You might do tiered fidelity every year and some of the other ones every other year or as needed.
Gotcha. So diving deeper into fidelity, you're going to want to think specifically about what you're implementing at your school and how you're going to measure those things, such as with your lesson plans. How will you know that your lessons have been taught? You may want to develop something like a survey that you can give out to the teachers to ask, did you give out the lesson? Did you teach the lesson as it was described? Did you modify the lesson? And what did you find challenging about the lesson? It's not going to be a perfect measure of fidelity, but at least it'll give you a sense of whether it was implemented and what kind of problems may have come across, and your team can problem solve around those issues. Once you gather that data, then you can summarize it and get a sense of the trends. Is it particular grades that are struggling, or particular clusters who are struggling, or particular teachers? Not necessarily to blame anybody, but to start engaging in a problem-solving process to figure out how can we support that teacher or that cluster of teachers in doing the things that we need them to do PBIS well. Here's a more formal way of assessing fidelity. This is the tiered fidelity inventory. This is one of our more popular instruments, and we do encourage you to use this. It can be given multiple times a year, but at least once a year. And it's done as a team, ideally, with an external coach, such as your coach through the Academy. And basically, you go through critical features of PBIS at tiers 1, 2, and 3, and measure whether those implements are in place, not in place, or partially in place. It gives you kind of a snapshot of where your school stands year to year in implementing PBIS. And now Christine's going to talk about outcomes.
Thanks, Eric. Right. So outcome data measures the changes in student and staff behavior, like office discipline referrals, suspensions, attendance, staff retention, and the like. And this data is linked to our goals or our outcomes and allows us to know when we've met our goals. So you're already gathering lots of data in your school, things like office discipline referrals, like climate surveys, grades, attendance, all sorts of academic performance, visits to the nurse, counselor, late to class. You might want to pause the video here and discuss with your team what data you're collecting and what might be most important for setting a goal. So you want to make sure that your outcome statements are based on data and they're important and meaningful to you and your school community. You want to make sure they're applicable to all of your students and, of course, observable and measurable. And, of course, written as a goal. So those goals, when we write them, we say they should be SMART goals. And SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time limited. You don't want a goal that lasts forever. You should have an end date. So you can see there's several different goals written on this slide. Some of them, like the one in the upper left, might be good for a school just starting out. It's an outcome goal based on fidelity. You know, did we do the things we said we were going to do? Are those core features in place? Once you move on a little bit and you're maybe years 2, 3, 4, and so on, you're going to have more specific outcome goals, like a reduction in office referrals or suspensions, or improving a score on your climate survey. Eric, anything you want to add?
Sure, just that your district may have specific outcome goals that they're focused on that may be well aligned with what your PBIS team wants to accomplish. So it may be worth considering looking at those outcomes, such as improving attendance or improving school climate. Right.
And sometimes they're not so aligned, but you're expected to focus on them anyway, and that's okay. So once you have your goals and you have identified the data that's going to go with them, you want to create a data routine for yourself. So again, is it outcome data that we're going to look at? Is it fidelity data we're going to look at? Once you've determined that, you want to assess the data integrity, meaning is it clean data? Like our staff inputting office referrals based on the definitions you have created for your problem behaviors. Then you want to identify the right people, right? Who's going to need to see the data and who are the people who are going to go in and collect the data and bring it to teams like your PBIS team. Sometimes it's grade level teams or even building level committees. Identify those folks. And lastly, you want to identify the right time, meaning how frequently you'll be collecting and reviewing the data, and what format should you be sharing that data in. Should it be graphs? Should it be tables? Right? What's going to be the easiest way to facilitate the decision making for that group? And you might need to discuss it with the group. So here's an example of kind of taking a data routine and the evaluation plan and kind of putting it together. You can see the outcome or the goal is on the left-hand side. Some of them are about fidelity and others are outcome goals. They clearly list the type of data they will be collecting. They have a schedule for how often they're going to review it. Sometimes it's going to be annually and sometimes it could be bi-weekly or even weekly. They've identified which team members are going to review the data. There's a little bit of overlap, but you can see mostly it's divided up amongst other people because this can be a little bit time consuming. So make sure you're not overwhelming your coach or one or a few team members. And then you want to know where are these data held? Where are they being stored? So if it's in PBIS apps, do the people who are reviewing it have an account, or do we need to get one set up? If it's an office discipline referral system, do they have the right access within your building? So it's important to check on that. So you're going to want to create something like this for yourself. You can do an evaluation plan and data routine separate, or you can combine it like you have here. But it's important to get it down on paper so you have sustainability going forward from year to year. And you can go back and check on your goals and your outcomes.
So, perfect lead in here. With that said, get together with your team and review your evaluation plan and outcome goals, such as, have you identified your outcome goals yet? If not, then let's develop 1 to 3 and make sure that those are ready to go. At least one of them you should try to have as related to student outcomes, like reducing office discipline referrals. You also want to make sure that, as Christine had noted earlier, that they are observable, measurable, that they're SMART goals. You also want to make sure that you create written data routines. If you don't have them already, you have a template that you can use right there in the prior slide. And you want to think about what barriers that you might come across as you're trying to engage in your data routines. Like Christine mentioned, making sure that you have access to that data. And then you want to revise and develop a written data routine plan aligned with your outcome goals. Anything else that you would add, Christine?
Just that you should definitely share the work amongst your team. Again, don't have anyone overwhelmed, and use your trainers as feedback people. If you want us to review your goals, your outcome statements, or any of your plans, we're here for you.